Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Fast Food Nation, starring Greg Kinnear, Patricia Arquette, Bobby Cannavale, Paul Dano, Louise Guzman, Ethan Hawke, Ashley Johnson, Chris Christopherson, Avril Lavigne, Izzy Morales, Wilmer Valderrama, and Bruce Willis, directed by Richard Linklater. Now, I remember going to theaters for this thing back in 2006. And is this a good movie or a bad movie? Because I don't remember my opinion on it back then, except for thinking it was okay, but let's see if it's the same opinion then to now. Let's get into it. We start off with families having a good old lunch time at Mickey's fast food restaurant as we get closer to a hamburger and we move on to Mexico in the U.S. border town where we meet Sylvia and Raul, played by that 70s show's Wilmer Valderrama, Esteban, Roberto, and Coco, and coming into America for a better life and work in a meat factory. Meanwhile, in Anaheim, California, we meet Don Anderson, played by Greg Kinnear, in a corporate meeting for Mickey's, and he hears about some bad ingredient going in their burgers by his boss Jack. And this opening is all over the place as we focus on three different stories. As one is with Wilmer Valderrama's character, two is Greg Kinnear's character, and one more I'll get to a little later on, as this is starting to be a mess of a movie. And do I like the characters? No, not really. Don has to go to Colorado as he has to check to see if Mickey's burgers are killing the customers. Meanwhile, Raul, Sylvia, Esteban, and Roberto, and Coco get driven into America by Benny, played by Luis Guzman, as he talks about thieves and gives them water bottles while on the road to America and drops them off at their workplace at a meat company led by an abusive boss, Mike, played by Bobby Cannavale. And I'm just going to say it now. This is a kind of a long movie at an hour and 56 minutes, as I felt 15 minutes of it dragging quite a bit. And some of it needs to be in the editing room floor, in my opinion, I'll say. Don gets to Colorado and sees a bunch of cows, and I'm thinking, these poor things, they're going to kill them so they can become meat. I'll never, I'll, I'll never have another goddamn burger ever again based on this movie. And I don't remember ever feeling that way when I first saw this back in theaters back in 2006. But after two viewings of this recently, oh yeah, it makes me never want to eat another fucking burger ever again. Mike introduces himself to all his new coworkers, even Raul, Sylvia, Esteban, and Coco, and a couple of others, as we move on to Don going to a Mickey's restaurant in orders from as well as chats with Amber, played by Ashley Johnson, who she was in a brief role in The Avengers, but I primarily know her first for playing Mel Gibson's daughter in that romantic comedy What Women Want. As she's the third part of the story of this movie, while her coworker Brian, played by Paul Dano, spits in Dodd's burger, which is absolutely disgusting and unsanitary, while Raul and Esteban starts their first day in the meat factory, and the cinematography in this is absolutely dreadful. While this movie is bad to look at, Amber's mother, Cindy, played by Patricia Arquette, asks Amber to pay a bill for the house while she has to pay the car insurance and talk about how her boss, Tony, lets her out of work early while we move on to Raul coming home smelling stinky after work at the meat factory. And at this point, I don't like any of the characters in this movie as they come off selfish this whole movie. Brian tells Amber, as well as Kim and Steve, played by Glenn Powell, about a robbery at a McDonald's. As we move on to Don talking with Tony, played by Izzy Morales, who's the general manager at the Mickey's restaurant in Colorado, and gives the number of Rudy Martin, played by Chris Christopherson. While we move on to Mike hitting on Coco as he wants to see her while a coworker of hers named Gloria warns her about Mike hitting on all the pretty girls working for him, and they hump each other's asses, later at the end of that scene as Brian picks up a patty after it falls on the ground, which is again disgusting and unsanitary, as these motherfucking people come off very despicable. While Kevin wants Brian to shoot Tony, and again, I don't like these fucking characters Sylvia works as a maid in a hotel while Dawn meets with Rudy in his truck and goes to his ranch and his house. Meaning his housemaid Rita, as Rita tells Dawn about how a burger place led by Harry Rydell, played by Bruce Willis, has cow shit in it. And I don't like the look of this movie, as it's an ugly looking movie with terrible dialogue and good advice, but it's disgusting. Dawn meets with Harry as Harry tells Dawn to make the burgers as it is, which is making it taste like cow shit. And he doesn't accept, and Dawn doesn't accept people coming in and well, actually, let me rephrase that. Harry doesn't accept people coming in and shutting his burger joint down, while Harry doesn't want to go after Dawn for shutting him down, but he will, as I feel like Bruce Willis is playing it like a bastard. As this is when he started not giving a shit about acting anymore, as this is one of his terrible performances. Dawn tells someone about a rocky relationship between Jack and Harry, that it'll get to the point it'll make Dawn lose his job, and he tells Jack Harry is not a crook, but test his burger joint. And Dawn leaves the hotel to go back home with a bad experience from the hotel he stayed at, and we probably won't see him for the rest of the movie, which doesn't feel good, as this movie doesn't make me feel good. Raul and Sylvia have dinner together, and the next day, Sylvia and Coco have an argument about Mike being Coco's boyfriend, as he's his supervisor, while Amber and Cindy have a mother-daughter discussion about how cute some puppies are. And we move on to Amber and Cindy having a visitor from Cindy's brother, Pete, played by Ethan Hawke, briefly. And Amber goes out to dinner with him while Cindy has a date that night. And Pete talks about sex and her future, let me rephrase that. And and this is the point where I was losing my patience, as these scenes went on a bit too long. Coco gets jealous over Mike seeing another woman, and she passes out while on duty, and she needs more sleep, as Mike takes her to someplace private and have sexual intercourse in the middle of the meet. Give me, something better than that, honestly. While Amber and Kevin talk about what cameras can see in the footage, as Amber and Kim have some drinks at the same place as she went with Pete, and she was approached by Andrew and Alice, who played by pop star Avril Lavigne, as they go to a party, and Amber decides to quit Mickey's because she wants to save the cows, even though she doesn't say it to Tony. And that's how I would handle it if I were working at a burger joint, as this is a small town by Amber at this point. I'll give her credit for that. Raul gets into an accident while his leg gets cut off, which is a horribly disturbing scene, as Sylvia learns about it and meets Tom Watson from Human Resources, and they tell her he had some drugs in him at work, and she doesn't believe him, nor his interpreter. And luckily, Raul will make it alive and out of the hospital, but at this point, I don't care. Amber joins Andrew and Alice for a meeting on how to save the cows, and one guy likes Amber's suggestion on getting the cows the fuck out of captivity during the day, while at night, Amber, Alice, and Andrew try to get them out, but they won't leave. For what reason? I don't know, until they get arrested and wonders why they don't leave their area in their dorm rooms, while Sylvia tells a friend about Raul being in an accident, and the friend comforts Sylvia, and Mike can't take that he's going to be out of a job because of Raul's accident, while Raul stays at home watching soccer games, and Maria will look after him, and he wants the kids outside. And we move on to Sylvia witnessing cows being killed and cut to pieces to turn into burgers, and this is the scene where I'll never have another motherfucking burger ever again. And we see more families from Mexico coming to America being driven by Benny, and he gives them some burgers to eat. And when credits roll, I was like, thank God, because one way I won't have to see another damn image from this piece of shit movie. As I was completely disgusted by this climax, and I'm done with the movie at this point in time, and I'll never see this ever again, and I'll explain why in my rating. But first things first, I'll give this movie a 3.9 out of 10. This movie's a mess as it follows three different characters from start to finish. And I don't like any of these fucking characters as they're selfish, despicable, and stupid. While the cinematography in this is dreadful, and as I will never eat another goddamn burger ever again after these last two viewings. This is not an engaging movie, and it was losing my patience. And this movie is 15 minutes too long as I felt it dragging. And I don't like the look of this movie, as this is an ugly looking movie with terrible dialogue, but good advice. I'll give it that. At the end of the day, this is another one of the bad Richard Linklater movies, as this is a non-recommendation. And if you like burgers, don't see this movie. And if you saw this movie, it'll never make you eat another burger ever again. And it's that disgusting and unsanitary of a movie. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and next time I will be back with me and Orson Welles. And until then, as far as burgers go,